Hey folks, welcome back to the Sedgwick Jimmy channel. We're certainly glad to see ya, and since it's October, we thought we'd do some spooky stuff, and today we're looking at the lost colony of Roanoke. The first English settlement in the present-day United States, founded more than 20 years before Jamestown. The inhabitants disappeared and their fates remain a mystery. So what's the story on the lost colony? Well, let's get into it. There were two colonies established at Roanoke, the first in 1585 under the direction of Sir Walter Raleigh. But the first was eventually evacuated due to issues with food and local tribes. Now, considering the colonists had burned down the village of Aquascogoc, I don't know if that's pronounced correctly, but here's how it's spelled, and all their crops because they believed that the tribe was responsible for the disappearance of a silver cup. And the natives kept dying of diseases after the Europeans visited them, which they attributed to basically magic. Oh, and they killed a native leader that had been on their side, then stuck his head on a stick outside their fort, so you could say that they pretty much soured the relationship between colonists and natives. And also, considering they were pretty much dependent on the natives for food, this didn't bode well. When a fleet returning from the Caribbean led by Francis Drake stopped at the island to drop off supplies, he saw their plight and agreed to evacuate the settlers back to England, leaving behind 3 colonists that chose to stay and who were never heard from again, and possibly some slaves that they were going to drop off there anyway. We only know that he started the voyage with the slaves, but they never arrived in England. What did arrive in England from the colony was the introduction of corn, potatoes, and tobacco. A relief mission had arrived after the evacuation, though these men were attacked by a coalition of native tribes and abandoned the settlement, leaving the island and never being heard from again. A later account from a local explained that they had been killed after the coalition caught up with them. The next group arrived in 1587, led by John White and including his pregnant daughter and her husband. She gave birth to a daughter, Virginia Dare, the first English born in the New World. Dare County in present-day North Carolina is named after her. They re-established the colony at the deconstructed fort, but found the going to be rough, mostly for the same reasons the first colony had. Food was scarce and the local tribes didn't trust the newcomers. The colonists attempted to negotiate a peace with the tribes through a friendly tribe known as the Croatans, but they received no response. A settler was killed while crab hunting, and in reprisal, White led an attack on their village, though they had abandoned it beforehand in fear of an attack. However, the English did find Croatan looters, which they mistook as hostiles and attacked. But luckily, they were able to smooth this little accident over. However, the colony was in bad shape, so the colonists convinced White to head back to England in order to return with aid. When he returned to England, White planned to head back to the colony as quickly as possible. However, being late 1587, news that the Spanish were amassing an armada for an attack caused the English to put off all naval expeditions, so White was put on hold. It wasn't until 1590 that he was able to return, at which point he found the colony fortified but deserted, no traces of any dead or graves left behind. Much of the settlement had been disassembled and carried away, as were belongings. Several trunks that had held stored treasures had been dug up and emptied. The only hint left behind was the word Croatoan carved into a post. White believed that this meant that they had moved to the nearby Croatoan island, but he was never able to confirm this as the ship's anchor line snapped and the ship had to return to England. John Smith heard stories after the establishment of Jamestown in 1607 of villages where people wore European-style clothing and spoke in their ways, though expeditions to find these locations failed to find anyone. Many believe the settlers simply incorporated into the Croatan tribe, something that the Croatan descendants claim, though DNA evidence has never backed this up. It is interesting to note that English settlers captured or living among the natives tended to assimilate rather well and rarely wished to return to their European ways of life. Another theory is that they attempted to return to England on their own using a small left-behind boat and became lost at sea, but it was too small to carry all 114 or so colonists, and no evidence has ever been found of the wreckage. Several tribes have been brought forth as either assimilating or slaughtering the colonists, and some believe that the Spanish may have attacked the colony, but again, none of this has ever been proven and no bodies were found at the site. The lost colony of Roanoke has gone down in history as one of the greatest mysteries of North America, the vanishing of over 100 men, women, and children still being investigated to this day. An interesting note is that many stones engraved with messages have been discovered that were supposedly left by White's daughter, Eleanor Dare, hence them being called the Dare Stones. But their authenticity is heavily scrutinized, and most believe them to be hoaxes, so sadly the mystery lives on. And that's just gonna about do it for our look at the lost colony of Roanoke, and if you liked it, why don't you give us a like. If you want to see more, give us a subscribe, and if you have anything to add, well, just head on down to the comments and let us know. We appreciate you watching, and look forward to seeing you here next time for more Sedgwick Jimmy in the future. Come check it out.